Hello, everybody. Today's during our watercolor session, we're going to explore a bit more neater technique, glazes technique painting. Well, we'll be creating an image of the Venetian houses. So we've got loads of bold color. You would have needed to do a sketch, or you can trace an image I've attached. So by using a larger version, just putting it under your watercolor paper, maybe slightly thinner watercolor paper, we can create that drawing. A tip for the drawing, there are loads of, sometimes we see loads of details. Some of the main shapes of the two buildings, the canal, and then just the rows of the windows. Okay, and then the extra, maybe just frames around the windows, could be done within its time. Okay, so you don't have to do every little element. There are little shutters or anything else in there. That could be just done by looking at the image afterwards. Right, so I have some range of brushes today. I have a mop brush. I have a flat, long bristle brush. I have a couple of round brushes, and I have a small flat brush, which I usually use for acrylics, but that will be probably handy for us to use for painting the windows. And what we'll do now, different artists do it differently when they want to leave certain spaces white. Because we haven't got a huge piece of work today, it's only about A4. You can enlarge it to A3 and trace it from A3 piece paper. So we're going to do a little bit more planning and leaving whites, okay? But if you struggle and if you do want to do another version, you can use masking fluid to help yourself out there. Right, so we'll start with analyzing our work today. And we'll start with looking at overall big blocks of color. So for example, I'm looking at the top left corner and I'm seeing some kind of yellowy ochre, something pinky in color. Okay. I'm seeing that the building next to it has much more orangey colors. However, each level have slightly different color in there, and maybe variations in there. Same as the base here. Okay, we've got loads of white areas which might stay white, for example, around the windows, which might have a little more of shadows or brickwork or something else in there. And then the windows. Now the windows looks complicated, but actually once we painted the walls around them, everything else will be filled in quite quickly, quite easily. Okay. Right, so I'm going to start with planning my color for the top left corner. So I'm going to check it out on my spare paper on the left. So let's go for some ochre. Let's find the color we want. Okay, so that's probably my ochre. That looks like more or less direct in color. And I want to add a small amount of orange to it. Okay, maybe that will be my next layer. So maybe the top layer will be more ochre. Second layer will have that little hint of a bit of orange in it. Okay. And what I'll do, I'll straight away go and load my brush ready for the area. It's quite straightforward here. I'll just paint the area, avoiding the windows here. So I'll just paint over my masking tape, making sure that my ochre is not too diluted. It's got quite nice and strong layer. And just gonna go over, I'm gonna come close to this little ridge. A paper towel, so if I've got too much water, I can collect it. Paint in between the windows. I'm gonna double check that my ochre is not too pale. Okay, just want to make sure it's not because it will dry light. Now, I haven't watered the surface because we're dealing with smaller surfaces here today, smaller shapes. It will be much easier for us to deal with it. And I'll just collect the water at the base there. Okay, done. Okay. Leaving it nice and light. It actually looks very similar to my masking tape here. And then I'll go for that hint of orange and a bit more ochre. Again, just double check that I have mixed it better there. And I'll paint it over. If you test in your color or you put a first stroke and it looks a bit too strong in comparison to the top layer, maybe just add a little bit more water and let it go further down. Okay, I can paint again between my windows. If you're struggling painting with your larger brush, maybe pick up a different one and find which is easier. I find this flat brush quite nice and easy to paint with, avoiding the shapes of the windows. If I want to have narrow gaps filled in, that's good. Now my strokes are full of moisture, so if I painted on one side of the window and then went around the other side, when I connect the layer below, it's staying the same kind of, it's staying still damp. It's staying still damp and it connects very easily. Okay. Now, while we still have the same color, that's a little bit of orange and ochre, we just use a smaller brush, and we have a couple of similar color elements inside of some of these windows. So I'll just paint around the white spaces here and maybe inside of those arches. If you haven't drawn them, maybe just do a couple of dabs. We'll be doing some darker colors and making more nuances for the shapes to stand out, but for the moment, quite straightforward. Quite straightforward elements here. We're not doing any shadows yet. I'm also spotting the same color within the arches of the windows below. So just a small brush, and not too much water on the brush. If you're collecting too much water, maybe just dab it on the paper towel. So then it dries quicker, and it's also, you do see the actual tone of that color, so it's not going to dry lighter than what we're seeing initially. Just little spaces there. And I'm also seeing a similar color just below. There's a little inside of the arch, inside of the kind of partially the interior of the space. Once we'll get darker tones around it, at least we don't need to come back to that little detail. So in some of the cases within the painting, we'll be working on big shapes, like say how we've done the top 2 floors, avoiding the whites, or we'll be doing the opposite. We'll be doing some small elements and then working with the bigger shapes over. Okay, good. Now we have quite a lot of small amounts of blue, but a lot of those details. So for example, the windows, some of the shutters, the shadows, even some of the mowing poles there, the same as the sky. So while we're at the top of the painting, we're going to pick up a fresh azure. Okay, just make it diluted, not too pale. Our rooftops are going to be dark to create an atmosphere of a sunny day. We need to have a little bit of that darkness, yeah, so it's not overly pale. And all of it could be applied at the same time. Just avoid maybe the chimney if you have sketched it. So I'm going to have less water close to the chimney, as there's not much space to go around, and fill the rest. Okay, we're gonna let it dry. And I'm going to use the same blue, but slightly darker, with my small flat brush, or if you haven't got one, maybe just a small round brush, so you can be a bit more precise. So I'm using the same azure, but a tiny bit more darker. And I can just check it, and yeah, can I do my windows a bit more precise? Or if they're too wide, can I do them, yeah, maybe that way, and make it easier for me to do maybe narrower sections if I needed to. I'll do a couple of windows here. Now there are some shadows, there are all sorts of things going on there. I'm going to avoid it all. I'm going to just do a block of the blue within the white frame. Okay. And for another one, just leaving a little white line at the top and then a block of blue. Filling all of that one in. Okay. I have more bluey windows, but they're slightly different in color. I want to have a dab of emerald green to it, so it will start looking slightly turquoisey. Now that's when we're painting with watercolor in such a precise way, the beauty of it, it's quite easy to do all this, just filling in almost like painting by numbers. The difficulty is to keep all the elements different and to keep the color varied. So this is my turquoise blue, and again I'm going to do the same here. Just going to paint it all the way down to the narrow line of the balcony. So don't paint to the rail, to the top of the rail if you've got one line. You need to have quite long shapes here all the way. Okay, if there is a third one there somewhere there, I'll paint that. Top up my color. So I don't have big chunks of water collecting at the bottom. This is much more easy to control. Okay, so the colors are similar, but they're different. They're similar in tone, but they're different. And I also have a similar color, maybe a dab darker. So turquoisey color, azure and emerald green, or if you have to go to turquoise, just gonna check it here as well. That's nice and strong. Maybe a tiny bit more blue in it. So look, that's better. I want to apply it for some of the windows. That's 1, 2, 3rd layer. Well, if you count it from the correct way, from the base, so that's the first floor. Now, some of the sections of the windows are covered by light green shutters. So if you paint all of the windows, it's okay. However, if you do want to make it varied, you can just refer to the picture, which one's going to have a full length or which one's going to have a bit more painted over. For example, the next window for me got nothing on the top, so I can just paint it there. Again, it might be just different kind of outer shutters, inner shutters. Okay, so that one's coming here. There are wider, here we've got wider gaps between the windows because there are thicker columns, and we'll work with them slightly differently afterwards. And again, I've got one here. And again, that variety, that's what makes the windows more exciting. So for example, if I do make the widths maybe slightly darker at the top, how the paint settles, maybe this one could have a tiny bit more, almost like I'm doing a second layer here, as it's drying quite quickly. So my windows may be similar in the widths, but they're already starting to look slightly different. And then the next one, I'm going to make maybe a step lower in volume. Again, I avoided the balcony barriers. I just painted all the way through. And the last one hasn't got all the length of it. It just stops here. Also makes you observe, because you start seeing that different windows are totally not symmetrical to others. So that quirkiness, how things been adjusted and amended and suited probably for inside of the building more than the outside, although the beauty of it's still there. Yeah, but it's fascinating to explore it when you paint. I'm going to leave the rest of the windows for now, so I can wash my brush and put it aside. And we'll start filling our big shapes part of the walls a little bit faster now. We'll start from the top. We'll be building up our layers towards the bottom of the painting, so we're not going to smudge it. So I'm going to start from the corner of the side of the building here. So we have some sort of grayish blue. How do we make that one? If I use my ultramarine, and ochre, okay, that's probably the green I'm going, sorry, the gray I'm going to have. So then it's not a boring dull gray, and I'm going to paint all of that section together. There is a drainage pipe, there is another element of the roof. I'm painting all of it together. Okay, maybe a tiny bit better, tiny bit darker than too light, because again it will gently dry lighter. Just make sure you stay, or try to stay, within your lines as much as you can, and if you have enough moisture, that will settle in evenly. And so that was my gray corner. And we'll come back to a similar gray with our windows while we have it. So ultramarine and ochre. So it doesn't look more into the ochre, maybe more into the blue. And we can do some gentle, just checking the color. Okay, maybe that's good, actually, that's good. So we have second floor of our arched windows for the building on the right. I'm going to just paint it plain in the middle of the windows here. We'll add some details after. Now, some of the arched areas, actually, maybe we shouldn't. Okay, we'll just do the two side windows if you haven't done anything else. Might be easier to paint lighter colors inside rather than jumping too quickly to the grays there, even if we see them. Okay, so that will stay there. Now I can see some more grays for the small windows, the tiny ones on the ground floor. Whichever way is easier for you to paint, just fill them in. While we paint in small sections, sometimes you end up with not enough moisture. And when you apply the color again to top it up lower, you start having patches. So be careful with that. So have enough prepared paint. So we've got a couple of those window and a door here. Right, let's do a little bit of playfulness now. Any small brush. I want to start painting the rooftop here, that lovely dark red, strong terracotta color. But I've got a chimney on the way, and I wanted to dry before I paint my roof. So the chimney looks like we have some ochre and a dab of orange. Okay, so that's quite small. So again, I'll paint all of the chimney, the lighter and the darker side together. And also I want to use the same color to paint part of the roof. We just done the gray one. So if I'll do a section in it of it, so it'll give me a glowing light. We'll come back to making it slightly dark afterwards, but we've got some light trapped in the shadow there. Fantastic. And we're going to mix the color for the roof now. Hopefully by the time we'll do that, our chimney is going to be dry. I'll use one of my darker reds. So anything to go from purple to magenta. Okay. So if I'll just go for any of those colors, I'll have more of a pinky, violety, purpley red. Okay. But I need to have a bit more warmth to it, a little bit more. So the pink is more going to the cool side. If I want to have it more warmer, but still dark, I'll need some orange. So if I'll use a dab of orange with that, and just balance it if it still wants it still to remain into the red. So that's a lovely, nice color. And it will be quite dark. It's going to be one of the darkest colors, probably as dark as some of our windows. Our walls, our orangey walls, will remain medium tone. So make sure that your roof will end up dark, not solid black. Well, not black, but not overly solid in stone, but nice and good darkness. You can help yourself with a smaller brush if you wanted to. If you end up trimming the chimney, just leave it to dry. And we're going to stop on the white edge of the roof. So my flat brush gives me perfect straight lines. I don't need to think about them too much. I don't need to worry how perfect they are. My brush does the job for me. I'm going to take it almost to the edge of the paper there. I'm going to let it dry before I do anything else with it. Well, actually, we're not going to do any of the details or any of the nuances till we painted all of the blocks of our building. Now, my next section for the building here is going to have lots of orange, but to create some of them old runny kind of how the paint been run down, how it's been washed or peeled, or kind of have that variety of texture within one simple color, we're going to do some glazes. So this is going to be our first layer. I'll use probably the same color I just had now with a little bit of extra orange, so that any of those purples or dark reds you might have had with some orange. And we're going to dilute it, maybe more orange than in our rooftop. In our rooftop we had more red. Now we're going to have more orange. So it's kind of a paler color. Okay. It's mainly going to be for it to be left out in some lower part of the top floor. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to again paint in between the windows. Okay, oh, I didn't need to leave any white next to the building, so that's okay. So in between the windows. You can see I've got some water collecting here. That should tell you that I have got enough moisture on my brush for the whole painting to kind of to work together. I'm not leaving anything else out. If there are any dark marks of supporting mechanism on the building, I'm just painting all of it that color. It's not the exact color we need for the final look, but this is how we're going to build it up. So I'm coming up to that little again, part of the shutter, part of that parasol. I'm not sure what it's called. Coming all the way to the building here, and possibly just on the left and the right of each arch. Okay, just here and between the arches. Now, if you haven't had enough time that the paint is drying to paint under that white shape, that rectangular shape, it's totally fine, because we're going to have a shadow there. And if you have a line for that shadow, that's fine. Okay, so I've got that color stretching out, so I can come back to my gaps here, but they're not, to be honest, they could have been painted different color anyway, all together with the shadow. So one way you can paint it all, another way you can just paint slightly darker version for the shadow here. Okay, so that's staying there. And for that color to merge, kind of have a bit more similarity with a building next to, oops, I've got some darker color somehow. With our building next to it, I want to do the same glaze partially. Just watch me if you stopped. I'm going to do it a little bit coming in the same color coming across on the building on the side. You're not going to see much of it, but it's going to be maybe on the left-hand side of it, maybe at the bottom here. That's it. It will just touch it gently. And I'll do the same with the floor above. Just a gentle, maybe on the top corner. That's it. Maybe dab underneath. So you have fresh color and you have a slight kind of that pinkiness going over. Okay. So a couple of strokes, don't overwork it. Okay. Now I'm going to use an orange. So I just mix some fresh orange with a dab of one of your reds. So I'm looking for more intensive orange, for example, the crimson. Okay, so that's the type of color I'll look for. Now my pink might still be a bit damp, so I'm going to leave it and let it dry. But if I use my small brush with that color, I can paint the little gaps of that architectural structure, the decorative feel. So if you haven't sketched it, just use your brush to create those little indentations. We're going to try to keep them roughly the same in height and roughly the same kind of the top line and the bottom line need to be a bit more similar or as similar as you can get them. Width-wise is not as important. Because then they form the line for us very easily. And we can use the same color for the side of the chimney on the top there. Now I'm ready to paint over my pink. That's all nice and dry. If it's a tiny bit damp, it's okay. It's not going to do much difference. But again, what I'll do it slightly similar how I was painting the next glaze over the other over the building on the left. So I'll just top up my boldness of the orange. So the building will stay stronger in orange under the roof, and it will start getting lighter towards the windows, those lovely arched elongated windows. So because it's a darker shape, I'm just going to make sure that I have got it not too red. I'm checking my darkness here. So I'm painting between the windows and I'm going to drag the color down. Okay. Because I wanted to have that patchiness. And I'll soften my patchy kind of, I want to see that pink we painted first. So if I leave it to dry, it might be a bit too late to kind of to blend it more gently. But if I have a bit of water now, I'll soften it there, but it still shows that the water's been running there. It's not going to make it perfect. We're just going to just dab that color in. Okay. And I think I want a bit more stronger orange in between my arches here. A little bit more stronger. And then blend it out. Okay, so we've got some sort of texture, but nothing too major. I'd prefer to have simpler, simplified shapes and simplified color there rather than a lot of texture in there. Okay, that's better. Those areas behind the arches looking better with a bit of stronger orangey color, orangey, yellow. They've got a bit more sunshine on them. I also just spotted that two side arches, not like it's a big thing, but I remember on the window they had like a brown, like a different stone. So if you do that, you can have the top, the right and most left and the most right arch at the top painted over, so it hasn't been a mistake. It's just slightly different stone left. Again, your very own variations will be totally fine. So don't feel, oh, I haven't painted that quite right, or I haven't painted this one quite right. Just checking that that's drying. And it has got enough darkness. Right, and while we're on this gorgeous orangey color, orange, maybe a dab of cadmium yellow, so we have a nice stronger orange color. I'm going to paint under the balcony. Now there are a number of darker shapes. You might think, what are they? They are the parts of the blinds or shutters which come from under the balcony. We're going to ignore them for now. We're going to just paint over all of that area with the light orange up to the arches. Okay, so maybe just watch me here. If you do want to paint around them, you can, but it will look more united if you paint little elements separately. The paint dries a bit more patchy. What I will do, because I just fancy doing it, I'll leave little white dots. You can just paint over them. It's again, it's just an extra element which could have been left with the masking fluid or not even included at all. So it's constantly making, okay, what's more important here? Those little brown shutters, or can I come back and paint them later? Okay, that's will bring the whole shape together. That's all like that. Nice and bold, so that orange is looking slightly different to our previous oranges. And I can paint maybe a hint of red. So if I can change it tiny bit more, or maybe an area below. Right, if I've got water on my segment, I'll need to make sure that I'll lift it. That's the beauty kind of the work. If water dries patchy, quite patchy, you're just going to have so much texture, you're going to lose all your small delicate elements. Okay, maybe a dab of more red at the base here. So it's not a difficult painting, but there are loads of patience of doing it. I think I can also see a little bit of orangey color on the base of each under each door here, and this is my space as well. You might have a labyrinth of lines, so maybe keep referring to my painting to spotting which element we're addressing. If you're painting along me and it becomes too quick, so maybe part of don't feel free to stop one segment of painting and move on to another one, so you can always come back to it. Just touching up this section where I've missed, just under the balcony, I just missed a little bit. That's nice and bold and strong. And I'll next paint my two floors, the two bottom floors over the arches and behind the mooring poles. They have a very similar approach. They have some stronger orangey yellow color, and then more of an orangey surrounded, and then some darker colors to come around. So I'll be dipping into the orange, into the red, and possibly into a dab of violet. So this is what's going to happen. Again, maybe watch me and I'll give you some time to do this. So I'm going for some yellow, for some orange. I'll paint it. You can do a section at a time and another section at a time. I want to keep it simple, so I'll paint some nice, because I have enough moisture on my brush, nice orangey yellow. And there's some boldness of it. It's going to come maybe on the cross. I don't know if it's a light, if it's a paint peeling off, something there. Maybe over the window, maybe some more here, over mooring pole. Now don't be scared of painting over the mooring poles because they will be much darker. Oh, that's quite a lot of red. Okay, just a little bit of that. And I want to paint kind of on the edges of these sections. Be careful with the arch here. Okay, we're going to dip into maybe a bit of violet so that red is no longer standing out very strong. So just a little bit of that. It blends together. Again, maybe I dip into a little bit more red. You can decide if you want to swap brushes or if you keep painting with this the same brush. So a little orange, a little red, a little more violet, a bit more again, you're moving on. Any of those variations will be fantastic. If you're painting slightly different with the nose color options, totally fine. Okay, so that's there. Now, while I'm on this building, I'm going to fill in the rest of the space here. And I think if I let it dab more violet, it will make it slightly darker. The top will make a nice shadow and blend it with my current colors. Ideally, they shouldn't be dry. Okay, so that's all coming here. Again, if I need to have stronger orange, because the color, the violet, become more diluted and looks cooler, I need to have that heat here. Maybe again a dab of red, a dab of orange. I've got a dry patch here, so I can soften it here. That's nice. No other details are needed. For the same area here, even if some of these patches will dry, it's not going to be a big deal. I'm going for some red, I'm going for some orange, mixing them together. The colors might separate two buildings. If you end up with the same color, that's fine as well. Okay, I just need to avoid my window. That's where that accuracy comes in. No white gaps all the way to the white section part of the wall. So that's the one thing you will need to do, is just to try to look out for where do I stop for the white. So maybe before painting, look out at the section you need to be working around. Okay. Close to this window, to this door. If you do struggle with the painting close to the what do you call them, the mooring poles, just paint over them. That's not a strong point here. They will be very, very dark. Okay, the rest could be just painted over. There will be some small shadows under the balconies. I can do much later as things are drying. And I'm adding a tiny bit more darkness maybe to my paint, or maybe just changing it to a bit more red or a little bit more. Very small changes, very different to the paintings we've done before. So this is just small scale. I think I might need a smaller brush here. Got loads of little teeth. And the small brush does the work for me again. Okay. While our orange is drying here, let's come back to some of our windows. Let's start with some of the lighter green ones. So we have the shutters or part of the curtains, blinds, whatever they are, from very light green. So I have a yellowish green, and I'm going to add more yellow, cadmium yellow to it. You need to stay dark. It should be slightly darker than our orange. Okay, so it's nice and bold. We want that wonderful color present. So I'll paint the space in the first window all the way. There's some more darker tones further, but we're going to do the glaze for it. The full arch, except the narrow line of the white over here. Again, same here. All of it is covered. We'll have a shadow on it later. This one is slightly longer, so we'll make sure we paint all of that in one go. And this one as well. Okay. Nice, bold and strong. I'm going to use a similar color, but I'll add a dab of green to it, and well, maybe just a little bit more blue. Green might not do much. Okay, dab of blue. Maybe a dab, oh, perfect. And a dab of orange. So my variation of greens. So it's slightly darker green, but most importantly, it has something orange in it, something more blue in it. Oh, this is my diluted version of it. It doesn't have to be that perfect to what I'm doing. It could be just slightly different green, okay? And again, I'm just leaving a frame of white. A frame of white. If you draw on any extra lines for the shadows, just paint the whole block of that. And what I'll also do, it looks like those balcony little colors. I'm going to do a couple of dots, kind of little marks, just to show that that color is seen on the balcony. Maybe it is like a Juliet balcony. Somehow we can see that color a bit better. And I can also make this color slightly more orangey. Slightly more orangey. Okay. And I want to paint all of these windows here as well. Okay, there's no gap between that ochre shape we've done. Now it looks like the window furthest away on the left got more of a darker tone. Oh, sorry, all the way down to the base of the balcony again. And the windows which will be coming towards the center, they will start to have slightly lighter tone. So maybe I need to watch out for that. Okay, maybe a dab of water. Not huge change, but okay, I need more water to carry on the color. Again, those white columns, that's what makes the painting to stand out, what makes it more exciting. That crochet of details. Okay, if it becomes too light, I might just move and bring my color slightly back. I'm happy with that. I think to make my door slightly darker, furthest away, I'll just do another layer for it. That's it. And I have a little effect of something's going on with the shadows in there. And this is a nice color to work with for the part of the all the segments of the painting. If we were to dilute it, if we were to add it to other colors. So it's the same color if I just make it very pale. Tiny bit more blue to it. I will have one slightly different. That's quite a lot of blue. Yeah, maybe something like that, but quite diluted. That's good. So any of that orangey green with a dab of blue, and I want to move it from one color to another. So I'll paint over the same arches we just worked on. So no white line need to be left on the top, but close to the arches, we need to paint over the arches, not to spoil them ideally. If you struggle, take less water on your brush, have a smaller brush, or another one is use a masking fluid, and then you can just put a quick stroke. And when the paint dries, you can lift the masking fluid. Okay, so under the, I'm going to have a bit more of a shadow there. Under the bigger chunk of the windows, I'm going to have slightly darker color, slightly maybe bluey green there. And then I'll just soften it edge and leave it blank. And just to show that I have got an arch here, I might just do a small light outline of the arch itself, so you've got loads of light, but we do see it separately. The blue. So it's not a difficult painting, it's just loads of little things which needs our attention. Another orangey green here is some arches, architectural elements in the corner here. And I can get them more sharp, get them sharper as the paint, when the paint dries. Okay. And again, this orangey green, very light orangey green, very diluted. Yeah, kind of almost appears as gray when it's on against the white paper. We can do some of the gaps. Well, I'll paint the whole of the spaces of these arched windows, because we'll do some shadows over them, and then they will stand out very, very light. I'm not too worried about the top of the arches. You can spend more time doing it, but because it's going to be a darker color going over it, I'll give more attention to that area afterwards. I'm more interested in leaving my white columns again. Okay. And again, all of that will need to dry before we do anything else. But while it's drying, can I see similar color anywhere else? More of a bluey side of that orangey green, tiny bit more bluey side. I can touch up a few columns here, a few decorations of the white stone. Maybe there are a couple of little marks or lines or almost like indentations within them. Creates small depths, maybe between the white window frames, maybe on the left hand side of the columns, to show the depths of that column. So the light is standing on the left to show the column is quite deep, so it might be quite a bit of a space between that layer and the window itself. And then on our little white patches of decor, it's plaster, we can have small marks to show maybe the brickwork. There might be imperfections. So it's kind of a bluey gray green kind of little something of color. Maybe show the other little elements of the columns on the side. And we will use a similar color, more into the blue again. Even if you'll do a pale blue, it's fine if you're still thinking Julia's Kilp, mixing all this tricky color combination. Just pale blue is fine. I'll put a line under the rooftop. It's so pale, we can see something there more because there is a white next to it. And I'll put one underneath of our blocks of orange. And I will also do a little, some of the lines in between. Again, that might just show a tiny bit of relief for some of these shapes. Some of them not going to have anything. Pale blue. Oh, we haven't done those windows yet. Okay. Pale blue could go for my curtain here. Okay, maybe a tiny bit too blue. More of a gray, more of a dirty, old white fabric cloth. So you can bring a bit of yellow to it or orange to it. So it's more of so far just a mucky shape. So we're doing loads of little things which fill the white spaces on our painting, but it hasn't done any nuances or sharpened anything. I'll look out for any other white spaces of any of the smaller columns. If I can cover them in pale gray green sections here. Often there would be patterns on those lovely columns, or it will be just to show a gentle shadow or a little separation of different elements. So if we'll leave the whites glowing, it will be a bit too much for at least some of it. If we'll give just an off-white pattern or line or something for our pure whites, that will be an advantage. I think most of our whites are done. Columns, maybe the underneath of the each little top of the column could have a little shadow. Again, it's so small you might not see it on the screen, but it will make a difference to your painting by the time we'll touched up our shadows. Right, another little color of the same, sorry, another section of the same color, green or blue and orange, same color. Just want to top up a couple of these hidden windows, or their patterns, maybe they're part of the design, and little circles of the on the wall. Maybe they're just imitating, creating something visually, but they're not actually real windows. Maybe they're murals. Some of it is peeling off. And that's the beauty of it. And I'm going to have, again, I haven't done any shadows here from the balconies, but I can see a little indentation of color. Maybe it's, again, small raised surface. And then I have a couple of more windows left of slightly darker color. So emerald, azure, or any of your blue with a dab of emerald green. I think we had a similar color before. Maybe I can make it slightly darker, maybe with indigo even, or something of that kind. And I have the top windows here. Okay, I can make them slightly darker and slightly greener. So indigo. Okay. Okay, the more accurately I'll do them, the better. I'll let these ones dry. And then the two on the top, maybe slightly lighter. Again, I'm only leaving the white frame around the window. I'll paint the shadows separately. And here I can do little dabs of dots showing the balcony texture. Excellent. Now let's do the bottom arches here now, and finish the bottom part of the painting. And then we've got the shadows to play with. Okay. So to make the depths of the arches here and the door, we need to start painting lighter colors. That's why, for example, we've painted already this little lighter segment. So I'm going to have that ochre back on my brush. Ochre. And I have a little bit of the green we've just been using, the pale green. And I want to paint my arches. That's the tops of the arches. The columns will be left white. The tops of the arches probably made out of a different stone. So we can paint all of them. If they're coming out, I didn't paint them too neatly. That's totally fine, because we're going to have much darker tone underneath. Okay, so that pillar is going to be painted. The arch will, sorry, the column will stay white. And I want to do the same thing for this door. So I'll paint all of it at the top. Okay, I'll paint The door, almost the same. If you wanted to have a reflection, you can just or paint it or paint the columns here. The door, the steps at the bottom, same as these steps coming to the water. All of that one could be there as well. And I want to make it slightly different, maybe reflecting some old color on the door. So adding slightly stronger red here, going up, and maybe a dab of violet at the top. Okay, just all blending together and letting it dry. No white gaps. So when that area dries, we can do it. We can paint all the shadows. I'll also paint this window here all together in ochre. And when I have a bit of ochre on my brush, this little white section of the lower part of the wall, maybe small texture of the brickwork, and a little lower area close to the water. I'm going to have very deep, dark kind of green sediment on the wall, how things settled. But above it is more darker ochre. And then we're going to have two brushes. Okay, maybe doorway here, so tiny bit. We're going to have two brushes so we can paint our water very quickly. Because we're going to have some green tones, orangey tones. I'll start, I think I've got more orange there than green. So if I'll start with loading my brush with green, I have a darker green here like this. Okay, so that brush is ready there. And I'm going to have some lighter yellowy orange, yellow, so orange and yellow next to each other. I'm going to ignore my poles if you can, because they have got more coolness in them. So if I can leave them out, I will. So I'll paint like individual sections. So for example, that orangey red is painted. Okay, I painted over the pole by accident. That's okay. Bit of a gap here. Bit of a gap here. I can stop while these sections are still wet. I'm now going to add some more red to it and paint a little bit more red. So I'm looking for some of the similar colors we've been using for our buildings. I'm going to paint some more red in the middle of those sections. I'm going to let them settle. It's quite wet, so I can have more control. And then the top, I'm going to use my green and paint a couple of strokes of pale green. Well, it becomes pale green as I'm painting it over the wet yellow. So I've done one segment, and then I'll repeat the process. A bit more lighter, yellowy orange. We will have some dry strokes on top. So far I want you to focus on them main colors. Okay, so I'm going to leave. No, that's okay. That's all of that one's going to come here. And some more red here, well, orange. And then my green is going to come here again. Okay. And I'm going to paint, you know what, I should have done a bit more orange further in to cover the arch. Okay, that's all covered. And then the green could stay in the middle. I want to see how it will start running. And just adding a dab of fresh layer of paint. And I'm painting, so that will be our reflections. Okay, if they're soft, you're doing a great job. If they're a little bit harsh, we will be doing that later. Don't worry if they're harsh, just leave them. I'll kind of touch them up afterwards. Okay, so that's nice, that's staying all orangey. And as it will start gently drying, we can touch a dab of red to it. I want more dry strokes afterwards. That's will be enough for now. Let's work now on our arches at the bottom here, those larger segments. I'm going to mix the same color we used for our rooftop. So we had any of our reds, darker reds and violet together. Okay, and some orange. Making it a little bit more towards the brown than the red. And I'll paint the space behind the arches. If you want to keep the columns white. Okay, we've got the floor there. I'll keep the floor white. Okay, so if you miss it, it doesn't matter. Not a huge big deal, but if you can leave it out. Okay, so all of that one just mainly painted over. So we can see a nice fresh shape of the arch. I can come close to this window. Makes everything again nice and neat. Got that lovely pattern we painted earlier. So I'll just keep drying my brush so the tip of my brush goes accurately into all these segments. Most importantly, that the whole tone of all of that area is the same. If you start adding more water, or water is kind of moisture of the paint collects and different parts of the section differently, it will have very patchy effect. So that evenness is very important. I'm going to let it dry, and we can do a shadow underneath of the arch. But while I have this color, I'll do the curtains, blinds, whatever they are, or which overhangs my green windows, the windows with the green shutters inside. So they become just little shapes. You can see better, right? Against the orange, I need more red. I need a little bit more red there. So any of those reddish color will be fantastic. Reddish brown, reddish violet, reddish orange. So they're just big chunks. Think of them as groups, blocks of brown. Don't have to understand what they are and how they work. They just hang there. And I'll also use the same color, but diluted. So if that is my strong color, this is going to be diluted version for the shadows under the balconies. So for example, over the arch, I've got the shadow, but it still looks too pale. So if I'll do a quick glaze over it, that looks much darker now. If I'll do a glaze, just a stroke under the balcony there. Okay, it just settles it in a little bit more. If I'll do another glaze under the darker windows here, just careful one. Okay, just get rid of the straight line here. There will be some shadows of our brown curtains shapes we just been painting, but we'll have to let it dry. We're also seeing the same color over some of the arches at the top. I'll paint inside of side arches. Okay. And I think maybe add a little bit of similar color to part of the window frame, maybe the side. And we'll start adding some details, which I'll show to you on a larger scale first. Okay. So when we have our arch, let's say that pointy side of it, we'll need to make sure that we're going to show, so for example, I'll have a white left there. Okay, so let's say that's inside of our window. Okay, done something a little bit wrong. I'll explain it. Let's do it again. So I have my, let's say, window painted inside. I have my building painted around it. So I have my white frame for the window. Now to start making my, so that looks quite flat. So that's the color of my building. So to start making it much more three-dimensional, we're going to start adding some shadows. Now, while this shadow is, while this painting is a bit wet, I will add on the wet surface or on the dry surface. Dry surface comes out easier and quicker. I'll do things like, I'll do a darker tone on one side. So each window will have a darker side. Let's say right-hand side is going to be darker for us, okay? I can do it tiny bit underneath of the window. That looks much three-dimensional immediately. And I'll do the same with the green, blue. I'll have on the right-hand side of the frame, slight line and on the right hand side here. Okay, and if I wanted to do something, let's say to create designs or patterns, yeah, so that's the type of thing I'm going to do for, I don't know, for some of the windows where they might have some larger scale. Nothing else. If we're doing shutters, we might have some less perfect lines. Yeah, you've got your shutters in the window. So that's all I'll be doing now. So I'll start with my pale brown color. So I mix it from red, dark reds, violet, and orange. So that will work together with our arch and with our rooftop. It doesn't have to be overly dark. If I'll bring it here. So for example, each arch here will just have a slightly slight outline for it. So it's not jumping at me. It just gives that indentation, a little indentation, difference between what's the wall and what's the window. Same, for example, here, I could do just a small line here and maybe underneath, and maybe even little dabs to continue those balconies. Okay, it's so pale we can just about see it, but step away and it's become significant, from something very flat to something much more three-dimensional. Okay. Little shadows underneath, for example, here in the roof, I can do the same, just little dabs on the top. Nice sharp shadows appears immediately. On the edge of the roof, I can do the same thing, maybe little dabs, almost just carrying a line, but into semi-broken line, makes the edge of the roof, tiny shadow for it. Little metal elements which hold in the building together as it's been falling apart, we can add. It creates that beautiful Venetian antique, yeah, broken and fixed. Imperfect shapes. I'm not sure what that is, but it just looks like loads of little dabs, dots. Must be just an architectural element to create a beautiful edge, maybe a line underneath of it, or some sort of version of it. Again, a little more shadows around the windows. Say maybe something here. There's some more relief going on. So they're light, but they are making a massive difference to the whole painting. Touches. So that's when you saw me doing maybe a couple of windows. All the rest is your own version of it. You just need to get going with it, really. Tiny bit more darker line under the balcony for me here. Now I'm not going to be doing all windows, possibly later on, but that's the principle of the outer windows. Same thing is actually going to be here. I've actually almost finished them. On the right, on the left and on the right hand side, and the little circles to show that three-dimensional feel. So it's that attention to details. And that attention to details here. It's a steady hand. Okay, that's good. And I'm ready for dark shadow for my lower arches and some darker shadows on the windows and the poles. And we'll be finishing things off. So I need a bigger brush for the shadow. I'll use indigo and some violet. Okay, actually indigo and violet looks too strong. Maybe still dab off. No. Okay, I'll go for dark reds. Dark reds, indigo. That's better. And I'll fill the whole arch here, so that's nice and easy. That violety look from indigo and red makes a bit stronger one. I'll have almost like an outline for the column here on the right, on the right hand side from the column, and then a sharp line, so that will be a shadow. Yeah, gives us that space created. I think if I'll drop it lower than where my column is, that will be better. Looks more natural. And I'll do a bit more of a shadow here as well. So it looks like the light continues. The light continues. And I'll paint inside of my window. Okay. And then the same color could go for to paint the gaps. That's again just a fine brush to do that little change with more darkness. And the doorway. Okay, we can even make a little gap of the door between the two doors. Wanted to do more definition of the layers of the door. We'll just let the dark tones dry, and we'll just put another layer of ochre, and I'll do a few steps, just few lines here, and maybe the gap will be a dark gap here to show the steps are finished, and that is maybe a shadow there in between them. Okay, and that's when I move into the greens. Green with that violety indigo, and that green will be part of the algae growing on top of the walls. Part of that becomes violet, and we have a sharp edge next to the water. All of that usually is quite blacky green, blacky something. Yeah, that's how the how some of the seaweed and other sea water of the canal settles on the buildings. Got a nice dark edge. I'll do maybe a little bit more darker one on the steps here as well. Bit of that width. And then finishing touches on the water will be a fresher green. Okay, I'll just do few strokes to show them the water reflections of that green over the wall, kind of over the arches area, over the darker kind of doors area. Maybe that's a window, so it could have slightly more darker tone in there altogether. If you want to make it longer or shorter. The door here. Okay, and maybe just generally, just to show small change in the reflection. And I'll top up a couple of darker reds. Darker reds and orange. A bit more fresh will be better. Okay, orange, red together. Okay, too strong, so a tiny bit more water on the brush. That leaves a little lighter space. That's maybe, I don't know how the light is working, almost like different stretch of color from different places of the on the building. Yes, we've got a bit of sharpness to that. Like that. Okay, that's all settled there. And I'm going to make my mooring poles here. Just indigo. Paint them all together first. So if there are any colors which gone over, for example, my orange, my green gone over them. So that's unites the whole pole together. So I'm using a round brush because it's easier to do any thinner lines. So I'm not leaving any gaps. If I'm tiny bit going over some of the other colors, let's say of the building, of the water, it's okay. Because we will put, you know, sometimes they leave a little mark, but we will be putting them darker over it. Right, so that's done. You can just double check that they do look straight, don't look falling down. And then I'll go for solid indigo and maybe a dab of violet, but mainly solid indigo. And for example, here we can make the top part of that pole extra dark. Maybe keep a little bit of the texture. So part of them are still wet, part of them got a bit more kind of shadow from the building right next to us. But the contrast against the building makes it wonderful, makes it extra wonderful. So I'm not painting them all dark, maybe just the tops of some of them. Maybe that shadow is kind of following into the other pole with the shadow. This one maybe a tiny bit paler on some of this. And maybe a tiny bit not as super dark, but got that wooden texture stain as I'm using a slightly drier stroke. same as this last one. Tiny bit more dark at the top. Maybe more texture of that wooden surface. And I'm going to let them dry. If anything else needs touching, I can come back to them. Now, once we've got them nice and dark, we've got very dark elements in our painting now. The space under the arch and the poles, we can now work into the much darker windows. Right, I'm going to carry on with some shadows now. While I have my indigo, I'll keep on with that color, indigo and violet, or just indigo. Some beautiful shadows for the Gothic arches here. I can do little, again, lines maybe for the shutters. I'll try to make them varied. If they're clustered in one side, there might be a bit more spread out differently in a different part of it. Few nuances here. I'll paint inside of some of these arches. I'll be careful of trying to avoid the highlights, and I'll look out for where some of the shadows might be. And from time to time, I might add a bit more stronger color, for example, some fresher blue to this paint mixture to make it a bit more exciting. I'll look out for the shape of the silhouettes of the columns, if they need to be. Looking more specific or narrow. Okay, and then just again fill in the spaces. Tip here, when you're painting, each window, well, first of all, you're not going to be able to help yourself to make it different, but we want every window slightly different. We also want to make every window slightly, maybe a dab lighter, dab darker. Okay, maybe a little more of an arch. That's how those shadows created. So the less standardized they are, the better. However, the color will unite the windows. So it's not going to look that every single one of them is different. It's not part of the same facade. Okay, a couple of more of those arches. Now the column's standing out much better, and the shapes between the where the light is remaining, where the shadows spread, gives, we see from the mess of the drawing, yeah, of what is what. Now we see shapes, and it's much more clearer, much more simplified. So when you're drawing, kind of those are the shapes we needed to look for. Right, and a little bit more a shadow on this shutter and a few lines. It's like a totally different design to the other window, but that's fine. Maybe a little shadow under here. Right, I'm ready for, while these shapes drying, and that's what I would prefer them to do before finishing the balcony. I'm going to do some darker shadows for the blue windows. So I'll use a stronger ultramarine with indigo. And again, that just outlines the window inside. Some of them you will see better than others, but that subtlety is enough. Even could do it the same color on the top of the green, and the color looks adjusted over the green. I have the gutter here, a gutter here. Okay, so I can just follow again. It just creates something less perfect. Maybe even part of the edge of the roof could be slightly sharpened with the same color. Then the white is singing even stronger. Okay, the gutter is coming back somewhere. It's weaving out from here. It almost separates the buildings. Okay, if I'll keep the lines slightly appearing, disappearing. Yeah, without giving it huge attention, you know, by making it wider. So I'd prefer you to keep it lighter and less significant. Okay, maybe darker tone over this arch. Maybe there will be something indentations or a little shadow under the so it just gives it that extra three-dimensional feel. This might be a little plaque. This is when we were talking about adding extra depth to the doorway, putting a bit of extra color. And it makes it even more three-dimensional. Okay, again back to maybe indigo and a little red. Oh, sorry, I've forgotten these windows. Okay, let's come back to the windows. So blue, ultramarine blue, and some emerald green for the shadows. So then we have finished all the window shadows, and then we can just work onto the balconies. So the shadows that are quite strong. It tells us it's a very strong sun. It's that Mediterranean heat. The little line here in the windows might be, there's another rail there which we can't see, but we can only see the shadow, which is more significant. Okay, a little bit paler blue, and we can do the shadows for the arches, and I'll do the same color for both. They will look different because the one is against ochre background, one is against the green. And then I can do little dabs for the shutters. And again, some of them I'll do less and some more busy. Okay, that's good. So that those balconies need drying before I can paint the railings. Anything else I haven't finished? Okay, there's some shadows on here as well. And over. Maybe a tiny bit more darker shadows here so I can see them against the darker blue. Sometimes just under the pillar, putting a small mark, a small vertical mark makes that lovely architectural feel for it. Okay, so that's good. Any other darks in the lower windows? Just checking for the details. Anything else needs to be darkened? I think we're all good here. Ready for the balconies now. Okay, right, so let's start from the top one here. So indigo, violet, any of the darks you've got on your palette. And again, a small brush will be easier for you to handle. If it becomes too complicated, you can always pick up a fine pen and do it with a pen. The watercolor will give you a similar kind of nature of the quality of the paint and its or its ink. Sometimes we see that better, separates it. But it's okay. We'll, as long as it's if you find a way what works for you, it doesn't matter how it's been done. Right, another barrier, another banister on my balcony here. So maybe a straightish line. And maybe dots in between the line, the line above it or below it. Okay, maybe just again smaller lines going down. Perfect brush for it. I think when I was doing the original watercolor, I just used a small round brush. The painting is exactly the same size. So it was just loads of patience work. Now these are the old ways of holding the balcony. Some of them are twisted or kind of supported in a different way. Some of them are longer than others. Probably the balcony nobody goes out to for very, very many years because it's probably unsafe, but it looks pretty. Okay, any other ones? Oh yes, two more to go. Okay, that looks like sort of pattern on the balcony. Again, just use your brush if you want to invent your own patterns or simplify the lines. And the darker line underneath. There is something still light, so it might be reflecting part of the balcony, maybe part of the stone work still there, which is holding it. I'm gonna do the shadows for these curtains or those kind of bits of fabric. Maybe the old flags, because what they have these long supported kind of metal segments which almost like kind of lean against some of the columns here. So that must be something to do with that. I want to do a couple of shadows here as well. But I'm gonna let it dry so my darks are not gonna be smudged. And another balcony here. Okay, maybe little dots on the top if you wanted to. And I do like those ends. So I've got a darker line underneath of the white. And these little feet, how it all holds on to the wall. Again, just a small nuance, but it does make that crochet of them painting working even stronger. Okay. And any other little dots or marks, or those metal things need to be painted over a little more for them to stand out. I'm not going to make them all the same. Maybe parts of the balconies slightly sharpened and dark tone. I think that's all looking good. Just few happy dots. Okay, those shadows I wanted to do. Tiny bit of red going over our orange here, just to have some sort of suggestion on the shadows. That's it. Or I can see my arches here could have even more depth to them. So if I'll put a couple of strokes at the top, just how deep that open balcony is, just create that extra beautiful space. Okay, when these ones maybe just quite flat, The other ones might be much more sharper. Maybe just to make it a bit more different. Some interest points in there. Just looking if I've missed anything else. I think I'm all good. I'm happy with the volume of details. I'm happy with playfulness of the color. And I'm ready to stop. Thank you very much for staying with me during the session. And I'll look forward to seeing your work finished. Okay, maybe little shutters, kind of showing the wooden texture. I think that's plenty, really. Not to overwork it, keeping it a bit more bold and fresh if we can.